Welcome to The Attachment Effect. We're doing a deep dive explainer today on the hidden psychology behind love, relationships, and those underlying patterns that absolutely shape our lives. Now, I want you to think for a second. Have you ever looked back on a past relationship and honestly wondered, how on earth did I manage to explain away so many glaring red flags? Well, if you have, you are definitely not alone. And more importantly, it is not a failure of your judgment. Today, we're literally decoding the neurobiology of why we stay, why we leave, and why we sometimes go right back to the exact things that hurt us.
We're going to explore a central and honestly somewhat startling psychological truth, and it's this. Your brain will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven until you teach it that safety is the greatest feeling of all. For a lot of us, our nervous system is actually programmed to pull us right back into situations that feel familiar, even if those situations are intensely painful. We're going to unpack exactly how that happens, but don't worry, we're also going to talk about how you hold the neurobiological power to actually break that cycle.
Okay, so let's dive into this by following Maya. She's a 36-year-old neurosurgery resident. By all accounts, she is intellectually brilliant, incredibly accomplished, and super driven. But despite her absolute success in the operating room, her personal life tells a completely different story. Maya finds herself repeatedly, almost hopelessly, trapped in this cycle with emotionally dismissive and frankly toxic partners. So that brings us to Act 1, the mystery of the spark. There's this moment where Maya checks her phone and listens to a voicemail from an ex. The tone is just really casual and dismissive. Instantly, you see her body physically stiffen. Because in that split second, she realizes the tonal register of his voice perfectly matches her father's, which forces us to ask this huge, crucial question. Why do we so often just completely bypass secure, reliable partners, but then feel this undeniable spark with toxic ones? Well, the answer starts with a concept originally coined by Sigmund Freud known as repetition compulsion. Modern trauma theory basically shows us that early relational trauma literally programs our brain to seek out familiar emotional landscapes. So Maya isn't consciously choosing pain, right? Her nervous system is just unconsciously seeking out an environment it recognizes. It's trying to finally win or master a painful dynamic that she first experienced back in childhood. And this perfectly illustrates a really fascinating scientific reveal, which we call the dopamine trap. You see, in toxic relationships, affection isn't just given freely. It's totally unpredictable. Sometimes you get warmth, and then other times you get the cold shoulder. This intermittent reinforcement acts exactly like a slot machine in a casino. The unpredictable nature of the reward actually creates a massive dopamine cycle. It literally makes uncertainty more addictive to your brain than consistency. Maya is biologically hooked on the drama and the chaos. All right, Act 2, the chemistry of betrayal. Let's map out this potent neurobiological cocktail that's happening right inside Maya's brain. First, those unpredictable rewards we just talked about, they spike her dopamine, tying the relationship directly to her brain's core survival and reward systems. Then oxytocin, the cuddle hormone released during physical intimacy, comes in and forms a deep biological bond of trust. And finally, her serotonin levels literally drop to the exact same levels seen in obsessive-compulsive disorder. That is what fuels that intense, anxious rumination about the relationship. Now, what is truly wild here is what we see in fMRI research on the brains of people in love. When you're experiencing romantic love, it just floods the caudate nucleus, that's your reward center, with activity. But at the exact same time, it literally suppresses your prefrontal cortex. And why does that matter? Because the prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain responsible for critically evaluating another person's character and intentions. So neurologically speaking, love is a partial deactivation of your own critical appraisal system. You aren't just ignoring red flags, your brain is genuinely blinding you to them. Let's pivot a bit to childhood for Act 3, the architecture of home. So developmental psychologists like Mary Ainsworth showed us that early experiences create what's called an internal working model. Think of it as a blueprint for relationships. For Maya, her father was emotionally distant and cold, and because of that, his coldness became her neurobiological definition of home. Her brain essentially learned to prioritize a highly familiar stress response over actual, genuine safety. So when a kind, secure partner comes along, Maya's nervous system just doesn't register it as a spark. It registers it as boring or even uncomfortable, because genuine safety is entirely unfamiliar to her. And this blueprint becomes deeply embedded in what neuroscientists call the default mode network, or DMN. This is basically your brain's baseline operating state. It's where your entire sense of self, your autobiographical memories, and your life narratives actually live. When a romantic relationship becomes deeply meaningful to you, its story gets woven directly into this network, which explains why leaving a toxic relationship is so incredibly hard. Threatening that relationship doesn't just feel like a regular breakup, it literally feels like a threat to Maya's own mental stability and her cognitive home base. And this biological addiction is staggeringly strong. Brain imaging studies led by anthropologist Helen Fisher looked at people right in the immediate aftermath of a breakup. What they found is crazy. Heartbroken individuals spend roughly 85% of their waking hours yearning for their rejecter. When they looked at photos of their ex, the exact same regions of the brain lit up that fire in individuals who are craving and withdrawing from cocaine. It's a literal withdrawal. Naturally, this leads to a massive internal clash, which we know as cognitive dissonance. When Maya's brain detects a mismatch between "this person loves me" and "this person keeps betraying me," a region called the anterior cingulate cortex sounds a really painful alarm. Now, to turn off that alarm, the brain has two choices. It can update the belief, or it can totally discount the conflicting evidence. Because updating her entire identity and default mode network is incredibly neurologically expensive, her brain overwhelmingly chooses the easier path. It discounts the red flags. So how on earth do we actually break free from this biological snare? Let's get into Act 4, the narrative audit. To tackle this, Maya begins a narrative audit, a process recommended by Dr. Marks to safely separate observation from her automatic trauma interpretations. The crucial point here is following these 5 actionable steps to really create some distance. First, you identify the unsettling moment. Second, state the observation completely neutrally, just the facts, something like, "he canceled." Third, write your interpretations separately, like, "he doesn't care." Fourth, look for recurring patterns over time, not just single, isolated data points. And finally, ask the honest question. If a friend were in this exact situation, how would I interpret it? Doing this creates distance, letting you evaluate the relationship based on hard facts rather than a trauma-induced narrative. And once we create that distance, we can really begin to build what neuroscientist Dr. Amir Levine calls earned security. Because here is the good news. Even if you had a difficult childhood, your attachment style is not set in stone. Your brain is highly neuroplastic. By prioritizing people in your life who follow the CAR method, that's people who are consistent, available, responsive, reliable, and predictable, you literally give your brain a brand new, much healthier template for what love should actually feel like. And consciously choosing secure people builds into something even bigger. You might have heard of the cyberball effect. Studies show that social exclusion registers in the brain exactly like physical pain. It hurts. But by prioritizing secure, predictable people, the ones who always throw the ball back to you, you actively reverse this effect. You create an enriched social environment that physically rewires your brain. It boosts your immune system, improves your emotional regulation, and raises your baseline sense of self-worth. So, I want to leave you with this. If you have ever stayed in a relationship way longer than the evidence supported, you are not broken. You were simply operating inside a brain that was trying its best to keep you safe using an outdated blueprint. Every week on The Attachment Effect, we explore the hidden psychology behind love, relationships, and human connection. And armed with the knowledge from today's explainer, what steps will you take to choose an unfamiliar heaven and finally teach your nervous system that true safety is the greatest feeling of all?